everyone, welcome to a new edition of Bookworm. I'm Angie Meher, and as usual our program brings you the latest books and publications available to all our readers and viewers in Egypt and all over the Arab region. Do stay tuned, we'll be right back with a look at these books. Knowledge and Power in the Islamic Experience by Abd al-Majid al-Sughayr. In the past, Plato expressed the relation between ruling philosophy and knowledge and science in order to possess authority. According to the Islamic concepts, authority requires recognition of knowledge, which leads to policy in addition to an eager desire to seek legitimacy as a way of protection to the nation by using scientific documents and jurisprudence as a provision on the modern changes. This helped Muslims not to follow inaccurate trends. The author points in his book that knowledge and power in the Islamic experience that the Islamic positions should be linked to its social returns. Besides, they must take people into account whilst judging matters and not indulge in adventures which might create a kind of tension on the regional arena. Moreover, a ruler must keep people away from dictatorship, opportunism, and intellectual domination. Islamic democracy means the activation of the principle of consultation, as a ruler has rights, obligations and commitments, for he is responsible for all the citizens. That is why people must back and support him. It means people shouldn't stand or stage a coup against him. On his part, a ruler must be a role model to his people and keen on the dissemination of science, knowledge and education amongst people. Plus, he must give good insight about the issues that require wisdom and fight against corruption, criminals and outlaws. Consequently, a ruler has to raise the status of science and scientists. Besides, they should be honored in congregations and occasions. A ruler must also implant noble values instead of leaving the society in the hand of weird Western trends that make people greedy. Finally, the writer warns against the changes which blur the identity of some scientists. Issues with the Past. Professor Muhammad Sabir Arab chose a good title for his latest book, Issues with the Past. The language reflects the writer's awareness of the message he wants to convey to his reader. The issues he deals with aren't old, historical ones which have nothing to do with the contemporary reality, like the ones which are taught at schools and colleges, but their events took place in the past and still have an influence on us today. As for the present, which started with the revolution of the 25th of January, we try to have a new partisan life in which the parties are considered as the most important pillars of the democratic life which we seek. This shows that we have to pay attention to our historical experience in similar cases. That's exactly why Professor Arab did by tackling the partisan experience before the revolution of 1952, which might have been forgotten, but they're selected researchers who still might have been forgotten. At the beginning of the chapter entitled Parties Programs, the author writes that the political parties which rose top power on the basis of the Constitution of 1923 weren't parties in a real sense, as they hadn't represented a certain social class, but they shared common interests and targets. It's clear that what Professor Arab writes describes the current party situation. As we saw during the last decade, each party focused on its leader, as if there's a store under the control of someone, while someone else is suing him to take control of it. The writer says that such parties don't have an influence on the street. Actually, it's ridiculous to say that they represent a certain class. It's noticeable that the policy of the parties which existed before the revolution depended on their relationship with certain people more than depending on certain programs and policies. Therefore, their programs became just slogans void of reality and marked by contradiction. Moreover, Professor Arab writes about the reality of the party's situation. The author writes that he repeatedly stated in his articles in Al-Wafd and Al-Masaya newspaper during the last years that if President Mubarak abandoned the National Party's leadership, it would be a small party after including 4 million members. In other words, it would be vanished because in fact it wasn't linked to Mubarak's character but to him being the highest authority. However, this applies to many other parties. For example, people know Ayman Noor more than knowing Al-Ghad party. When Noor had tried to promote himself in the streets as a candidate for the presidential elections, he didn't offer programs resting on scientific basis. Actually, he gave promises to people which were impossible to be fulfilled. He promised to raise the minimum wage to £3,000 per month. No doubt that in order to achieve this, we have to double the production rate to 4 or 5 times. The author believes that if Adam Smith had been alive, he couldn't have achieved that except if he had doubled the amount of banknotes which were printed. In such a case, a teacher's salary would be £10 million and an office boy's salary would be £5 million. What is Behind the Doors? A novel by Hisham al-Khishan. Egyptian Lebanese publishing house has recently published a novel titled What is Behind the Doors? An Egyptian Family's Secrets by Hisham al-Khishan. It consists of 182 pages. The novel introduced Professor Galel Amin. As for the cover, it was designed by the artist Hussein Gibail. This is the author's first novel. He only published a collection of stories entitled Egyptian Stories. Actually, this novel has a mature technical factor which enables the author to write longer stories. This way, he's gone to be one of the long story writers who predict a bright future for this beautiful art. The writer presented an introduction by Professor Galel Amin. Aside from this, the author writes an introduction for his work, but he doesn't show his own goal. He helps the reader to know how to deal with the novel by mentioning Mark Twain and Plato. The first one says, "I'm against the millionaires, but I'll be very dangerous if I become one of them." The second one said, "The rich lead a luxurious and lazy life, whilst the poor are offensive and low life, and both of them aren't satisfied." The novel tackles the story of a current rich Egyptian family who didn't get rich by corruption or influence, but they worked hard till they reached that richness. Money doesn't control them, but it's their feelings and emotions. A part of their feelings is just dreams and ambitions, whilst the other part is seizing opportunities in order to achieve personal goals. This is the general structure of work, as the author states, and that had him use several narrative techniques. For instance, he deeply contemplates the characters in order to show their inner self. He presents some characters as if it's a photograph. The narrator controls the characters according to the events. He doesn't criticize any of them. On the contrary, he lovingly deals with them. This is clear in the character of Margot, who's an American hiding her being a Muslim, and he does the same with her daughter Farida. The author shows a perfect relationship between two generations totally different in their awareness and culture. They're the key figures. As for the rest of the characters, he deals with their human situation. A social appearance doesn't reflect the character's reality. Professor Galel Amin writes in the novel's introduction, "It is a small novel, and in spite of that, it paints a big portrait, including a large number of men and women, and a lot of events which some of them are tragic. This novel raises a lot of grief and describes a lot of mixed feelings." Violence in the Internet Crimes by General Mahmoud al-Rashidi. This is a new kind of violence which has nothing to do with power or anger, but it is motivated by misusing technology which is known by the Internet. General Mahmoud al-Rashidi is one of the rare experts in security practices and fighting against crime. He has a wealth of experience in this field. In his recent book entitled Violence in the Internet, The Most Important Case Protection and Security, the book presents a future vision on the social and scientific changes which cope up with the development of information and communications technology in order to face the computer violent crimes. The book entitled Violence in the Internet Crimes has been published by the Egyptian Lebanese publishing house. In this book, the author tackles very important issues concerning the fields of computer crimes which touch our personal life in many cases. The book tackles this issue in 5 chapters by showing the computer violence and its features and patterns. General Mahmoud al-Rashidi affirms that although certain categories gained from the technological revolution, the disparity has led to the emergence of social problems, which people try to overcome by misusing the modern technological techniques, which is known by the name of computer crimes. It is a credit to the author that he followed the most important and recent happenings on the arena by describing and analyzing the events exactly like what's going on in the Second Life, in addition to shedding light on the risk of communication websites. Today, the most important website is Facebook. The author also sheds light on the most important and dangerous computer issue, which was raised in recent times, known by the name of WikiLeaks. This issue pointed to the inevitability of the security and legal review to the methods of protecting the registration and circulation of information. In the book, which consists of 121 pages, al-Rashidi deals with the most important computer issue in 2010, which was known by the name of WikiLeaks Storm. Actually, WikiLeaks website published about 250,000 diplomatic cables between the United States Department of State and its diplomatic missions around the world. Such cables included top secrets concerning military, political, economic and social issues of many countries around the world. And we now take a look at one of the latest books available to all our viewers and readers. Do stay tuned. My Story with the Regime. The third edition of the book, My Story with the Regime, written by Saad al-Shazli, was published by Madbouli al-Saghir's publishing house. It is narrated by Shazli and prepared for publishing by the journalist Sawsan Abu Hassin. The book consists of 288 pages, and it revolves around the relationship between Shazli and President Sadat in particular, as he reveals the injustice of the rule of Sadat and Mubarak. My Story with the Regime is considered one of the most important books that reveals a lot of secrets, as well as the Sadat's intention to turn the October War into a war of motion, not a war for liberation. It also shows the true role of Field Marshal Muhammad Abdel Menaim el-Gamasi. The book disclosed important information said by Brigade Fuad Nassar and head of the intelligence during the October War, and Brigade Saad al-Mahdi, the head of the artillery during the war, and the head of the intelligence during the Sadat's reign. The two brigades didn't speak before and didn't write their diary before, unlike their colleagues. This adds a new dimension to the importance of the book. The book includes a photocopy of Shazli's diary, which he himself wrote, in addition to some documents and an album of Shazli when he was a young boy. Sheriff al-Shubaishi was born on the 1st of October in Alexandria. He got his high school degree at Lycée School in Cairo in 1963. He then enrolled in the Faculty of Arts, the French department at Cairo University, and graduated in 1967. After that, he worked as an editor at the Sharq al-Awsat newspaper, and at the same year he worked as an editor for the Egyptian radio in 1968. From 1969 to 1980, he worked as a diplomatic editor for El Musawwir magazine. Later on, he worked as a French news presenter for the Egyptian television from 1974 to 1980. He then worked for the public relations in UNESCO in Paris till 1985, where he'd worked as an editor-in-chief of the UNESCO News for a whole year. From 1985 to 2002, he's been appointed as manager for Al-Ahram office in Paris. From 2002 to 2006, he worked as an undersecretary in the Ministry of Culture and Foreign Affairs. He then worked as a consultant for Al-Ahram newspaper till 2007. Since that time, he's been writing a daily article for the same newspaper.
I was really privileged because I grew up in an atmosphere of culture, an atmosphere where reading was a cult. I remember that my father had nearly 4,000 books. We had in our house, which was not a huge house, nearly 4,000. So we were living in the middle of books, and my father used to talk all the time about the importance of reading. So I was really impregnated with reading and with culture and with trying to understand, and knowledge was a very important issue in our lives. One of the books that really was a landmark in my life, I think this book completely changed my life. It is called, it's in French, Principes fondamentaux de la philosophie, Fundamental Principles of Philosophy by George Politzer. George Politzer is a French philosopher who joined the resistance during the Nazi occupation of France between 1940 and 1944, and the Germans arrested him and they shot him. He was shot dead. This book talks mainly about the history of philosophy and the opposition between the idealistic philosophy and the materialistic philosophy. George Pulitzer himself is a materialistic philosopher, and he defends the Marxist viewpoint. I have never been a Marxist, but I was really impressed by this book because this book is very objective and it traces the clash, not the clash of civilizations, but the clash of ideas in the history between idealism and materialism. I don't want to seem like a philosopher. I'm far from being that. But one also of the very important books that shaped my life and that shaped my way of thinking is the very famous Discours de la Méthode, which is the book written by Descartes, the very famous French philosopher in the 17th century. And he has put the fundamentals of skepticism and of rationalism. If the world now, when you say in French Cartésien, it means rationalist. It means something who puts in doubt ideas and knowledge, and he doesn't accept anything as an ipso facto reality. And this is mainly, really one of our main problems in the Arab culture, is that we take everything for granted and we take ideas for granted and we never put into questions ideas and knowledge. So Descartes and this book are a real landmark in the history of human thought and of human vision and apprehension of the world. My favorite poets, because I love poetry and I don't only read in French or in English, but I mainly, in fact, mainly read in Arabic and French. I love poetry, and I have two favorite poets, Al-Mutanabbi, the very famous Al-Mutanabbi, and this person, Abu al-Ala al-Ma'arri. I think this is not only a poet, he is a philosopher. He was blind, as you probably know, and he also had a vision of life that is sarcastic, that is intelligent, and he played a very important role in the Arabic culture. And you can say he is a phenomenon, and he is an exception in our culture, because he is not in the mainstream. He has always been against stream. And this book is about this philosopher, poet. Some people say he's a philosopher, but he is essentially a poet. And I read this book with great joy, because I love this man and I love the way he thinks and the way he discusses and puts into questions things that we think are coming from an upper sky and which is not true. And every idea should be discussed and should be put into question through the human mind. The book I am reading now, or in fact rereading, because I read it when the author came to my office in Paris and dedicated it to me. The author is Roger Caratini. He is French. He wrote, by the way, a very famous book about the Prophet Muhammad, and it's called Mahomet. This is the French way of pronouncing the word Muhammad. And this book is a very important book about the Islamic civilization, not the Islamic religion. He is not an expert. He told me, I'm not an expert in religion, but he's an expert in Islamic civilization and culture. And he retraces the evolution of Islamic civilization through the poets. Poetry is, as we all know, the main theme of Islamic culture, but also philosophy and great writers like Al-Tawhidi and other writers. And it is called L'Islam cet inconnu, Islam, this unknown. Of course, he is talking to the Western reader. When he says unknown, Islam is not unknown to us, of course. Islam is not unknown to 1.2 billion people who are Muslims. But this book is targeting the French people and the French-speaking people, and it has been translated into English, by the way, so it is targeting the Western people who don't know much about Islam. He is, in fact, defending the Islamic culture and the Islamic civilization, and he shows the impact of this civilization on the human civilization and the human thought. And this book is, I'm reading it, I'm rereading it now, and it is really an interesting book. Well, let's resume my readings. As I said, I love reading. Reading is one of the most important hobbies of my life. I don't want to say that, which is true, that I used to read at least 8 hours a day. Now a little bit less, but when I was younger, when I was 17, 18, I used to read at least 8 hours a day. One of the important things that I read is about Islamic civilization and Arabic civilization and Arabic culture. And a book that has been also a landmark in this history of Arabic civilization is this book, Islamiyat, of the great Taha Hussein. And we talked before about Abu al-Ala al-Ma'arri, and Abu al-Ala al-Ma'arri is the ideal of Taha Hussein. And this book is very important, and it gathers several books written by Taha Hussein, على هامش السيرة, and الفتنة الكبرى, and all these books are included here in this big book called Islamiyat Taha Hussein, which means the writings of Taha Hussein about Islam and about the Islamic civilization and culture. And Taha Hussein, of course, was not a sheikh. He didn't write about Islamic religion or Islamic Sharia, but he wrote about Islamic culture and civilization. A very important book also about the personality of Prophet Muhammad is this book entitled كتاب الشخصية المحمدية of Ma'ruf al-Rasafi. Ma'ruf al-Rasafi is also a person who goes against stream, and he talks about the personality of Prophet Muhammad through huge details. Apparently he has read probably hundreds of books to write this very important book that cast light about the personality of the Prophet of Islam. Well, this is, or this was a glimpse of my life with books, my life with reading and writing. And the conclusion I may draw from this very short recapitulation of my life is the importance of culture. I'm trying to emphasize the importance of culture and of reading. Of course, we've been living for centuries, and let's say for the last 30 years at least, under an authoritarian regime, under a dictatorship, and dictatorships hate culture. They don't want culture, they don't like culture, they like myths, they like to promote unreal things, and they hate the people who try to understand, because if you understand, you would refuse dictatorship, and you would not accept that a dictator imposes his ideas and his way of thinking on everybody in the country. Freedom of expression is the real motor, is the real drive of any human society. We cannot make a step forward without freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom of writing, and the free press and the free television and radio. This might be a conclusion of what I'm trying to say. I've always been a defender and the promoter of democracy, and now my dream and the dream of thousands of millions of Egyptians is about to become true soon. When I say soon, I don't mean next month or in a few months. I think we need at least between 10 and 15 years to have a well-established democratic regime in Egypt, and this will open a new way of living in Egypt, and Egypt will come back to its normal standing and to its normal mission in this Arabic world, which is a leader in not only in politics and in economics, but also a leader in culture, in arts, and in imagination. And as Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Thank you, and this is the end of my readings so far as today, but I'm telling you I won't stop reading. I will keep on reading, and I hope that each one of you will keep on reading because this is the key to knowledge. And I would tell you through my experience, this is the key of happiness. Thank you.